Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking about more sweet pre-modern decks, more cool things. Today we got the pre-modern Czech Championships, or Czech pre-modern Championships, happened about a month or so ago, and this is pretty cool, pretty cool. Lots of sweet decks, and yeah, 112 players, that's a lot of players, and let's get into it. Okay, first off, we got Stifle Knot, and this is a very typical standard list of Stifle Knot with your counter magic. This one is just mono blue though, so you can easily play things like Gush, Foil, and Daze, Thwart, etc. Low land count, very much dedicated to the Dreadnought plan. Very dedicated, very committed. And then we got, of course, Winter Orb and Cursed Totems and Crypts and all sorts of hate cards and stuff like that. Elemental Blasts in the sideboard. A lot of good stuff here, but something we've seen pretty often. Okay, and now we have Goblins. Yes, this is Goblins, and nothing too weird here. We got some main deck Naturalize, which is a fairly typical sort of main deck card, which I'm somewhat fond of. Got a kind of a wonky split of things. Cradle, I'm not a huge fan of. It's like okay-ish sometimes, but again, replacing things like Port, obviously going down on Port, I think is a big sacrifice. Not a big fan of that, but the rest is pretty standard, right? You got your random tutor targets, things like that, typical Goblins list. And you got some, we got Anarchy in the board in addition to things like the Naturalizes and Hull Breaches and stuff. Seems a little excessive. I'm not sure, again, although I mean 6 is like fine for those kind of effects. It is a bit much for my taste. Rebs, PK, all that good stuff, Crypts. Oh, of course, the obligatory Collar of the Claw, you know, the very awesome Collar of the Claw, probably my least favorite card that people decide to play. Not a big fan of it. Not a big fan. Yes, it is better with Cradle, but not something I'd ever really play if I ever had a choice. And we got more goblins, except this time we have one less mountain, or one less land, excuse me, which is not great. Slightly more one-ofs, more naturalized. Again, I think City of Brass is great. That's a pretty much you really want, not only do you want a lot of mana, but you want your colors of mana to work out, as well as being able to play things like Rashad and Port. No ports here. Again, I think going down a land and not playing any ports is a big miss. Not so great, but the mana base is okay. Even though that's really the biggest problem with the Goblin decks historically and in the current day, regardless of format, is your mana. Like, is your mana very good? You actually have a mana curve. Unlike most decks, you actually want to cast 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and sometimes even 6 mana spells, right? So not great to not really be trying to enable that as best you can. But again, I've said as much as I've said about that. I'm not gonna hammer on that too much. Sideboard, more or less the same stuff. Again, the horrible Call of the Claw. Why, oh why do you exist? And of course, Tranquil Domain. Tranquil Domain is the one we've looked at before. It's just the 2 mana, kills all enchantments that aren't auras. Tranquility. So yeah, it's good against Enchantress, kills random other stuff, like against Slide and things like that. Pretty typical list here, more or less, though. All right, and now we have Threshold with Breakthrough. Breakthrough is a common card that's been seen in decks that are really wanting to abuse the graveyard or the discard stuff or whatever, but I'm not a huge fan of it in just the sort of threshold lists. There's just, I'd rather just play Opt or something like that. Like, Breakthrough's not bad, like, even if you are kind of hard on the threshold stuff, even though it's only like 10 cards, which is classically what a lot of threshold lists have played. So I'm not a huge fan of the breakthrough. It's fine or whatever, but I just it's pretty awkward. Um, I'd just rather play more cantrips like Ops or something like that. Portent? Apparently no Portent here, or whatever. Okay, good enough, I guess. Sideboard is, again, just a bunch of cards that you can play. This deck has access to City of Brass and blue, green, white mana pretty easily, and of course, Mox Diamond for things like Pyroblast and other off-color things, like Fire and Ice. So yeah, pretty sweet list. Not super sure about the breakthrough. Like, I've always found Mental Note and cantrips, shoot, you're even playing Mox Diamond too. So Mental Note plus cantrips has always been good enough for me to like get Threshold fairly quickly. So I don't think really having to play something like Breakthrough, which is a pretty awkward, weird card to draw. I mean, there's just, it only does one thing, which is put a lot of stuff in your graveyard. It doesn't really do actual cantrip stuff like Portent or Opt or whatever, Sleight of Hand, that kind of thing. But interesting idea anyways, at least. All right, this is Dead Guy, and this is a very mid-range version of Dead Guy with all the stuff you see. Again, I think this list is a little... yeah, I feel like you need to play more lands. Like, I think there's just too many lands that you can draw, like Plains, Tainted Field, Wasteland. Like, literally, if those are the 3 lands in your starting hand, like, this is a total non-starter. No pun intended. That literally just doesn't work at all. I think you at least need another land. You need to cut down on, like, these... on the Tainted lands, play stuff like Gemstone Mine or Dromar's Cavern or something else, City of Brass. Tainted land is great when you have more swamps. You cut the wastelands, play more swamps, get your Tainted lands online, but yeah, you can't really, especially in a deck this black heavy, you can't just have, like, just draw these non-functional hands of like, oh, I have enough lands, but oh shoot, they don't produce the right color of mana. So that doesn't really work. Other than that, I think the list is fine. I think there's a lot going on. It's pretty typical sort of list. You got your removal, your mid-range stuff, and discard and things like that. The sideboard has got all sorts of cool stuff with our Enlightened Tutor sort of targets and all that good stuff. So good deck, but you gotta pay the piper when it comes to your mana, and I think people are far too greedy. In basically every format, always and forever, and they probably always will be, unfortunately. So don't be greedy with your mana. Just play good lands so you can play all the good cards. There you go. That's your PSA for me today. All right, and now we got Meddling Mage and Phyrexian Dreadnought in our blue-white Stifle Knot deck. Oh boy, 18 lands, same old stuff we've always seen. Just like the mono blue deck, more or less. Yeah, nothing weird. We got some impulses, which is nice. Main deck Annul, right? A little unusual, right? But again, Annul is more or less the same thing as Naturalize and Disenchant, and it's a very good card when people play a lot of powerful artifacts and enchantments in this format. So that's not very strange. Flash of Insight, I guess, is okay, like as a late game card when you're really trying to dig for a particular card. That's the one that High Tide used to play in Legacy, the like blue colorless X, and like you basically dig for X, or dig X cards for 1 card, and that whole thing, and has flashback. Yeah, that card's fine. I guess if you really want your, Winter Orb or Meddling Mages or Dreadnoughts or whatever, your Dreadnought Enablers, that kind of stuff. Anyways, nothing weird here. This is just same old, same old. All right. Again, we got a Goblins deck. Another one. The third one. So many Goblins decks. And of course, we have 24 lands, which is great. No Karplusan, or Karplusan Force. No Rishadan Board, which is not great. Again, not playing any of those, I think, is a big miss for a deck that doesn't have much disruption main deck, as well as the weak mana bases in this format. But we do have Mossfire Valley, which I'm always like going back and forth on. It's painless red and green mana, which is nice, but also it doesn't cast anything turn 1. But again, you're not really ever, outside of like the super combo, like hyper aggressive like combo matchups where you're just going like Mountain Lackey and just lackeying and a bunch of stuff because they can't kill your lackey, and then holding up mana for like Rebs or playing Crypts or destroying artifacts, things like that. You know, generally you'll want more than one land, and Mossfire Valley is pretty awkward as your only land, sort of, because again, the green might as well just be colorless. So it's a pretty awkward card sometimes, again, because you want more red mana to cast more spells, especially with things like War Chief. But it is an interesting card. It is, you don't have the problem of just like stacking up a million pain lands, which is not great. But it's definitely something I've gone back and forth on, and I think there's like reasons for it and reasons against it. So yeah, just thought I'd bring that up again, but of course, yeah, more or less. You got 6 colorless lands, which is basically all you can really afford for the most part, especially if you're trying to play 3 naturalized main deck, you need at least, you know, your 1 forest, 4 foothills, 4 carp forest, and then like Mossfire Valley is an additional green source is fine, I think, for 2 to 3 naturalized. You really want to be able to naturalize. I think is something you really want to be able to actually cast sooner rather than later against something like, say, Humility or Lightning Rift or whatnot. So having to pay the tax for that is great, because it's very difficult to be able to fit all of like your colorless stuff and all of your colored mana stuff and waste import into everything. You'd have to play like City of Brass, like 1 or 2 of or something to fix everything. But anyways, we've gone over this a million times. Just thought I'd bring it up again for the 1 trillionth time, because not everyone watches every single one of my videos, which is horrible. That's horrible. Why are you doing that? That's wrong. Anyways, typical Goblins list, not much to see here. All right, and now we have the blue parfait list, which is basically just the parfait list that lean heavier into the blue direction. So you can play more blue spells like Foil and Gaussian Counterspell and things like that. So kind of like, well, a parfait deck, but with more of a Drago control-y sort of bent to it. Being able to play actual counter magic, things like that is pretty nice. Yeah, I mean, nothing too weird, just got your control deck stuff slammed into your parfait deck stuff, and there you go. Of course, sideboard, always like to point out how awesome Meddling Mage is. Meddling Mage is so good against a bunch of different decks, like especially the combo decks where you need a clock and disruption, and Meddling Mage provides both. Pretty sweet. Yeah, not much more to say there. Just, again, good tutor targets against all sorts of different things. Yeah, there you go. Definitely a pretty sweet take on the tax rack archetype. All right, now we have red-green Ponza. So it's basically Ponza, but it's got survival in it, and we got all sorts of things like Ravenous Baloths and Avalanche Riders. Avalanche Riders being the ones that are gonna kill your opponent's lands, as well as the 2 Wastelands. Is that it? Again, it's not much of a Ponza deck. It looks more like red-green survival advantage, as it's sort of traditionally called. Oh, Hammer Mage. Oh shoot, Hammer Mage. I think that's the guy that I can't remember. Is that the guy that Meltdowns, or is that the guy that Stone Rains? Anyways, it's one of those spell shapers from Massblock. I probably should have pictured the card up, but because I can't even remember it. Dwarven Blast Miner is the one that kills non-basic lands, so that one's a Stone Rain, sort of. But definitely a pretty sweet deck. Yeah, a lot of good stuff going on here. Although I think too many Mossfire Valleys here, possibly, depending on how much you're leaning on survival. If you're just trying to have good mana, pain-free mana to cast your big fat stuff, that's fine. Same thing with like Ancient Tomb. Ancient Tomb is obviously not great with survival because it doesn't produce green. Like, you know, if you're just trying to do it one time a turn, you can survival, then cast your Ravenous Baloth. Anyways, interesting stuff there, but yeah, so it's a survival deck that has some amount of lane destruction. Very cool, very cool. All right, and this is Sly, and this is exactly what you would expect. Again, not a huge fan of 4 Barbering, no fetch lands, but again, that could just be to budget concerns. Big fan of Firebolt, of course. Firebolt, great. Firebolt or Shock. Shock, again, is my least favorite of the Shock variants. Seal of Fire is another very good one. Only one Fire Blast, a little wonky. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that. Yeah, I don't know. Especially if you don't have a bunch of fetches, like Fire Blast, putting a bunch of cards in the graveyard to enable Barbarian Ring or Grim Lavamancer is pretty great. So yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I'm sure this guy had a reason. Anyways, I don't like it at all, but it is a thing, I guess. Random Pyroclasm in the side. Again, I've been like, like, I don't know. I don't feel like the Pyroclasm is super great. I guess if it's good against goblins, obviously, but I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it. I feel like I'd want something else. But anyways, there you go. There you go. All right, and this is Grotog, and this is nothing too weird. Pretty typical list. Again, stuff we've seen before quite a few different times. But I just like to say, as I always say, I feel like this is also a few too many, or a few too few lands. I like 17 or 18. It's just a huge problem when you just don't draw or your lands get destroyed. For your 5-color lands, that is, you really always want to play your stuff whenever you need to play your stuff, like all of your off-color spells that you need to fire 2 Jackal Pups or something like that kind of thing. So I like additional things like Gemstone Mine or Reflecting Pool, maybe. Well, mostly Gemstone Mine is a little bit better. Again, it's another card that can pitch the Mox Diamond, another land, as well as just another 5-color source. But other than that, I think it looks like a pretty solid list. Of course, always like Force Spike too, as well as Daze. Those are fun cards. Big fan of Force Spike. Big Spike fan. All right, and now we have more stuff with Dead Guy. Basically, same old thing as we saw last time that we just talked about. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this mana. I think you really have to make sacrifices for your mana for it to work. You get to play a lot of really powerful spells like Duress, Verdict, and Vindicate, as well as Swords, Ritual, Enlightened Tutor, Hypnotic Spectre, Massacre, just really powerful stuff or just some good stuff. And we really want those cards to be able to play them, right? So I just don't really like just this one has 10 non-black producing lands, right? You can just draw Wasteland, Tainted Field, or Plains, Wasteland, or Plains, Tainted Field, Wasteland. It's just like these are just non-functional, like Plains, Tainted Field, Caves of Kolos. It's like, okay, so I have only 1 black and it hurts me. It just not great, not really great. So I think it's better to, again, I think I like 24 lands in these. Again, I like more swamps and or things like Gemstone Mine or something. Otherwise, yeah, just you gotta pay the piper, and the piper is your mana base. So there you go. All right, this is Enchantress. It does Enchantress stuff with all the Enchantress cards. This one has Cop Red, Green, and Artifacts, and also Cop Black in the sideboard. So it's got everything. But it also has Multani's Presence, which is an unusual card I don't think we've talked about before. Whenever a spell you play is countered, draw a card. Very good against blue decks, obviously. City of Solitude is also another good one, which prevents counter magic, but Multani's Presence is another good card that you can play that if your stuff is countered, then you get to draw a card, so that's pretty sweet. Pretty cool card, pretty sweet Scott Fisher art. You can't really lose there, that's for sure. But yeah, this is Enchantress, so there you go. And we have Blue-White Stifle Knot in the third position. Third place. Yeah, pretty typical Stifle Knot list. Similar to all the other ones. Last Breath, I believe, is a card that, was it destroy target creature with power 3 or less or something? I think it's just a removal spell, so don't worry about it too much. Just another way to kill stuff. I think, yeah, because they already have the 4 swords, so maybe it's the next best one. Exile is okay too, I guess. So it was like Reprisal. Anyways, yeah, there you go. This is Blue-White Stifle Knot. And now we have Blue-White Landstill. Wow, look at that sideboard. Very typical. Look at that main deck. Very typical. But yeah, got the Wasteland Dust Bowl split, which I wouldn't say I like. I'm just not sure which one I prefer. You know, do I want 2 Dust Bowls or 2 Wastelands or whatever? Wasteland being obviously much more mana efficient, Dust Bowl being better in longer games versus decks like the Rock with more mana lands. Maybe even being able to cut them off mana more consistently. Interesting stuff there. But also we got just, I don't know, main deck Prohibit. That's not exactly super spicy. Yeah, it's just Landstill coming in at number 2. All right, and at number 1 we got another blue parfait list. This one's slightly different than the last one. We have Oath of Druids, so we got the Oath stuff in here. In the sideboard we also have Psychotog. I'm guessing that you want to Oath up and probably not, you know, have your Gaia's Blessings in your deck when you do that, so you can immediately kill them next turn. Achroma against red decks, or I guess black decks too. All sorts of other sweet cards. Gorilla Shaman against, well, probably against something like Null Rod. Gorilla Shaman's pretty good against Null Rod. I guess it kills a bunch of other random stuff, but killing Null Rod's pretty important, so you can use your Scroll Racks and Mox Diamonds and stuff. Yeah, a lot of cool stuff here, but this is again one of the newest decks that we've seen. Yep, it is mother freaking blue parfait. Parfait that is blue. Blueberry parfait. Almost, except this one is actually bluer, so it's more like, what's a blue ice cream? I guess it doesn't matter. Anyways, so that's it, guys. That's for the Czech Premodern Championship. So much interesting stuff. Well, mostly it's just stuff we've already seen, you know, but still some cool decks, cool thoughts of mine to share that you've already heard, but I'm going to share them again, and you're going to have to listen to them. So yeah, there you go. So thanks for stopping by, guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and have a great day.